We have the midterm elections really right around the corner. And a question I want to raise as you think about casting votes is there such a thing as a good Democrat? Now, that can be looked at in a number of different ways. I suppose a good Democrat can be somebody who is a Democrat, but nevertheless a good person. And in that sense, we know Democrats who are decent people, or decent people for the most part. And yet, for some reason, sometimes puzzling or even inexplicable, they vote for the Democrats. That is something that's part of our lives. But the question I ask is a different one. Should we be voting for Democrats at all? Or rather, should we vote the straight ticket? And by vote the straight ticket, in some places, of course, you can straight ticket vote. In Texas, Debbie tells me you can't do that anymore. But of course, you can straight ticket vote by just going down the line, identifying everybody who's a Republican, and regardless of who they are, voting for them. So in other words, the question I'm raising and the argument I'm going to make is that even a bad Republican is better than a so-called good Democrat. Why? Because there are no good Democrats, or to put it somewhat differently, the only good Democrat is a former Democrat. Of course, I'm thinking here, of course, of Reagan, who was a former Democrat and in that sense, a very good Democrat who recognized that he was among the bad guys. And Reagan always took the view that the Democrats were the party that left him. One of his sayings that has sort of been registered and come down through time is, I didn't leave the Democratic Party left me. Now, I've never been entirely on board with that. I used to be. When I was in the Reagan era, I thought it was a very clever saying, and I thought the Democratic Party had actually moved. But if you dig even further back, this was before Reagan. Reagan was a product of the Depression and the New Deal. His father worked for the New Deal. But the Democrats have a very sordid history going back to Andrew Jackson, going back through the 19th century, and then, of course, the party of slavery and segregation in the late 19th century and in the early 20th century. So this is a party with a very bad history. But it stands collectively for very bad things now. And even if you vote for a good Democrat, the good Democrat is not going to be able to stop those bad things. In fact, the good Democrat is going to be counted on, whether in the House by Pelosi or in the Senate by McConnell. In the Senate by McConnell, by Schumer, to continue to deliver bad things for the bad party. By contrast, if we see a significant tip over to the Republican side, and if there is a sufficient margin, we can actually put up with all kinds of dubious and questionable characters on our side. Why? Because we don't need them. Imagine if Republicans had a 30 or 40 seat advantage in the House and there were 20 Republicans who can't be counted on. So what? Not only do you have the House, you have the majority leader, you have the leadership of all the committees. All the committees become chaired then by a Republican. You're controlling the agenda, you're controlling the bills that pass through the House. And the same story is true in the Senate. Obviously, if the Senate is 51-49, then we need really pretty much all the Republicans to hang together. But if you have 54, 55, then you've got a little bit of a margin. It doesn't matter if Susan Collins goes over here and Romney goes over there. You don't actually need their votes. So the point here is that American politics is fought in teams. There are only two teams. And by the way, if it ever crosses your mind to look for some third team, there is no third team. The way to get the Republicans in line is to, let's call it, MAGA-ize the Republican Party. And the good news is that that process is already underway. That process is already going on. It will be further advanced if we get the kind of results that I'm expecting out of the 2022 election. And of course, one of the supreme ironies will be if the Democrats who, by the way, have confessed that they have tried to subsidize the Trumpster candidates, the so-called far-right candidates, the so-called election deniers. And Democrats are like, we think those guys are going to be easier to beat. So wouldn't it be hilarious if Don Bolduc wins in New Hampshire and Blake Masters wins in Arizona and Kerry Lake wins for the governor, and if J.D. Vance wins in Ohio, the Democrats' worst fears will have come true. And that would be a result just downright delightful to behold.